We respectfully acknowledge that the Windsor Regional Hospital occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Niswi, Ishkwiden, Anishinaabeg, the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. We acknowledge the land and the surrounding waters for sustaining us, and we are committed to protecting and restoring these lands and waters from environmental degradation.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the October 5th Board of Directors meeting of Windsor Regional Hospital. So we'll call the meeting to order. Thank you for your patience. And for anybody joining us online, thank you for your patience this evening. So we'll call the meeting to order at 5:19. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to the previous minutes of September 7th, 2023. They were in your package. Assuming everyone's had an opportunity to review them, can I ask for a motion, please, to approve the minutes? Thank you, Paul. Second by David. Any amendments, modifications? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Thank you so much. That passes. So David, report of the president.
So thank you, Madam Chair. I will jump right into my report with respect to an update where we're at regarding influenza and COVID. Similar to last month's presentation, but just to give an update, is historically we've always looked at what's happening in Australia to determine what our influenza season will look like here in Canada and Ontario. And we examine, since their influenza season, of course, starts earlier than ours, is our summertime. And as a result, if you look at the orange line is what they experienced last year. And we see a dramatic increase to a dramatic number of laboratory confirmed influenza cases as compared to the red line, which is this year's laboratory confirmed influenza cases. You will see their season started, although it did have a mild increase. The dramatic increase started about 2 weeks later than the previous season in Australia. And the number of laboratory confirmed influenza cases peaked out at about half this year as compared to the previous year. The descent is similar to the last year's descent, although you can see it's kind of lagging a bit, meaning there still is a considerable amount of cases still occurring in Australia, even as it's descending. Now, this chart is only as good as the fact that it's laboratory confirmed influenza cases. So therefore, if the testing has gone down, the number of people being tested has gone down, that could explain some of the reason why this year's number of cases is far less than last year's. So as a hospital, what we look at is this next chart is the number of influenza hospitalizations, because that is a far more accurate number. And unfortunately, as you can see, is last year's orange, even though they had a substantial amount of positive influenza cases, it peaked out regarding hospital admissions rather early. If you look at this year's, the number of hospitalizations is 30 to 40% higher than last year, and it has dropped dramatically. But it took about 10 to 12 weeks for the drop to occur from its height. So one of the things we have to be concerned about here in Ontario and Canada is what happened in Australia, especially with respect to hospitalizations. And again, an explanation could be that the laboratory confirmed cases is not as high because there's just less testing. But the hospitalizations is something we have to unfortunately worry about. Now, for Ontario so far, nothing has really started. This goes to week 33, which is pretty much the end of August. So we're already in October. We haven't seen a dramatic increase or even a significant increase in influenza cases over the last month. But we are getting close to week technically we're getting close to the start of when last year's influenza season started. So if we're 2 weeks behind last year's influenza season, again, we're probably looking at our influenza season to start near the end of October. So either the third week or the start of November, somewhere around that last period of October, which is, as it stands now, about 2 weeks away, is when we should, if Australia is the guidepost once again for us, which generally is we should start seeing an increase, and most likely it'll be similar to the Australia increase, and unfortunately it might follow the Australia hospitalization numbers as well. So we look at one area we do look at locally is even with COVID, we flip now gears, is we look at wastewater and COVID. And what I tried to highlight here on this chart is the fact that I looked at September 23 of last year, and this is where COVID was detected in wastewater. And if you bring that over to this year, it's not as high as last year, but it's in that range. We have these, we have this increase on COVID in the wastewater here in Windsor, Essex, and that's similar to across the province. Again, all predictions, all projections are we're going to start seeing more COVID cases, and I'll show you what we have in the hospital currently and talk about what we're expecting. So right now in the hospital, this number is now dropped to 14, but we have approximately 14 or 15 cases of COVID, and they're here treated primarily for COVID with one in the ICU. Now, over the months of July and August, that number was down to like 6, 5, 8. So in September, it started to increase, and now we're into October, and it's starting to increase back up again. Where we start seeing issues, and when the numbers were dramatic, it was when it starts getting to 30, 40, 50 COVID positive patients in the hospital being treated primarily for COVID. That's when we're at our peak over the last couple of years. So we are starting to gradually increase. Will we get to those 30, 40 cases? Again, that's the projection, and then add the influenza cases as well. So the last time we looked at masking, if you look across the province of Ontario, it started in Ottawa, similar to the way COVID and influenza spreads. It starts in Ottawa, it moves it down to Toronto, hits London, and we're last on the list of regions to see influenza and or COVID generally. And that's been a traditional pattern that we've seen. We've seen masking put into place in hospitals in Ottawa, the GTA, London last week. And ourselves in Erie Shores want to be proactive and not reactive with respect to this. And as a result, starting Tuesday at 12:01 a.m., we are going to have our staff will be masking when they're within 2 meters of contact of any patient in the hospital. And we have to remember, this does not apply to visitors yet. We strongly recommend visitors do wear masks when they're in the hospital, especially seeing patients, but we're not mandating it yet. Again, this implementation is similar to what we had in place in June, was one of the last steps before we eliminated masking. So now we're at that stage again where we're starting to see those numbers start to increase. And we're back on that same trajectory, and we're back to the same last implementation of masking is this one here. Could it possibly go up moving forward and start including visitors? It could. Again, we're going to have to track it. But right now, with respect to what we're seeing and what is being projected to happen over the next week or two, we're putting this into place in order to protect our patients and our staff as best we can. And again, looking at visitation and looking at visitors having to wear masks, but right now it's not mandated. This is exactly what London put into place effective this week. So Erie Shores and ourselves are doing this. And we have to remember that we have a lot of uniquely specialized patients here at Windsor Regional Hospital who we care for. The only thing that we're always asked at this time is, should private entities reflect this? Should other organizations do what we're doing? And the answer is they have to make the decision themselves. Again, we hold a unique spot when it comes to caring for individuals who are immune deficient. And we have to, again, be very proactive and not reactive when dealing with these situations, and not wait for the numbers to dramatically increase before we implement something like this. Knowing that, again, the projections are clear that we are expecting to see these within the next 2 weeks. So we want to get in front of it as best we can. And we've cut it as close as we can, that we have done so safely. So 12:01 a.m. on Tuesday, these changes are going to be put into place. Again, we support any visitor that wants to wear a mask. Masks are available at every entrance for visitors to put on surgical masks. And we would strongly recommend that they do. It is not mandated at this time, but it is for our staff, again, when they come in contact 2 meters of an existing patient. And of course, there are higher levels of PPE required if there's an outbreak unit or another issue with a patient. Of course, those still apply regardless of this. So that's the next stage we're moving into. We will continue to monitor things to determine if we have to increase it. I would love nothing better but to come back here in December and say we actually have to decrease it. And there was no need for this. But unfortunately, that doesn't look the way it's going. So we have to do what's in the best interest of our patients and our families and our staff at this time to try to keep everyone as safe as possible, while still looking at what to expect in the future, in the near future, and monitor this regularly. So that's my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for David? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for that. And that moves us to the next item, which is the C&E report. I know Karen's not with us this evening. Is someone else doing that? Don David, or are we skipping that item?
Yeah, that's me. I just gave.
Okay. You just gave. Okay, so you covered both. Perfect. Okay.
Both.
You're an interesting Karen, but thank
Yeah.
you anyway. Okay. Okay, that brings us to Dr. Jacobs. And I don't see him online, so I think that was attached, so I'll assume that's for information. And that brings us to Ian for the financial presentation, tab B.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, all. Matt, do you have the slides? And the next slide, please, Matt. These are the results for the 5 months ended August 31st, 2023. Good news we received during the month of August that we've got confirmation, a reallocation from one time to base funding for 2023-24, $32.7 million, comprised of $25 million for 49 acute medical surgical beds, $6.2 million for 8 critical beds, and $1.5 million for 5 acute mental health beds. And we also received $700,700 to confirm base funding to operate the 3rd MRI, and that's a partial year. And that on an annual basis is $800,800. Please. I'm sorry I've taken over for Anthony, Madam Chair. Next slide, please. This is the results, the financial statement for the period. As you can see, we had a surplus deficit of 5.4 million compared to a planned deficit of 5.8 million, for a positive differential of $400,000. The lines are there. I'll go to the next slide and I can run through the significant variances. We see medical staff fees, which is positively offset by patient services revenue of 2.4 million, which leaves us with actually a net positive number of 339,000. Medical surgical supplies, we have a deficit of 1.5 million offset by revenue from QPD funding for hip and knee replacements of 645,000 to leave us a net of around 900,000. On the drug side, we have a loss on the expense of $3.1 million. We have a positive revenue variance at 2.9 million from retail pharmacy recoveries of 421,000 and ministry drug funding for chemo in Reno of 2.5 million. Other supplies was a minor difference of 376,000, this is offset by savings in laundry lab expenses and course fees and materials. That, Madam Chair, is my report, and I would take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Any questions for Ian? Okay, thank you.
Seeing none, I will table a resolution that the report from the September 25th, 2023 Finance Audit and Resources Committee be accepted.
Okay, thank you. Seconder, Paul, thank you. Any questions with any of that? Okay, all in favor? Perfect, thank you. Okay, so Ian, I think that covers off number 8 as well.
Yes.
And in tab D, we just had the correspondence and the printed material that's in the media report. That's for information only. That brings us to item number 10. If there's any board member questions, comments, or motions. Okay, seeing none. The date of our next meeting is November 2nd, 2023 on Zoom. And I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Genevieve and Lori, and wishing everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you.